Okay, so I just finished watching my group's video for the week 4 group video on most of it was about active learning and a few other things. So I'm going to peek back and forth between the screen and my notes that I tried to take since I'm trying to remember everything they talked about. That way I could just kind of give my responses that I would have naturally given in the process of their conversation had I been part of the video. The first thing that Shannon had brought up was active learning and kind of just having small group sizes in a classroom and that personal experience. As a reading intervention teacher in my classroom, intervention is supposed to be designed for that purpose of those small groups. And I've mentioned before, my groups got up to 10 kids in a 40-minute thing at one small table. So it really wasn't that small group size of what it should be. And we got to see some of the negative effects of that, and our students didn't really benefit from it. And Lisa kind of talked about why once you get beyond 4 people, there's always an outlier that kind of just takes that quiet step back and becomes an observer instead of a participant. For most groups, especially young kids, we try and keep them in pairs. The most we'll let them have is a trio, and that's when someone will take the lead and kind of guide the other two. And it's usually if you have one that's a higher learner as kind of supporting the other two. The other instance would just be that you have them doing something synchronously. In my class, it would be if there's a group of 4 and I have to work with one child, I have the other 3 read in unison. And it's choral reading to just kind of support each other so that way they can hear each other and pick up on those errors and correct each other. But generally, beyond 4, it really doesn't work. Trying to think of what else. As far as personal experiences with active learning, I personally am not a group person, but I understand the benefits of it. It's more just because I wasn't brought up in school that way, and it's kind of a shift. I tend to like to work by myself, but that doesn't mean I can't see the benefits of it. Even in this occasion, I'm working on my own, but I'm feeding off of my group's collaborative efforts. So it still is, in a way, an learning process through group method you have. And it's true because sometimes tuned out and you give them an assignment. If it's a individual assignment, they're going to try and stop the teacher and ask, what am I supposed to be doing? And you can try and get them to go to their peers, but depending on your classroom management styles, it might work, it might not, and sometimes they're going to ask someone and they won't know either, and then they get off on a whole other tangent and you just lost 2 instead of 1 and sometimes more. When you have that collaborative effort, they'll kind of team together and figure it out on their own or go through the process. And they may all be wrong, but at least they're all going in the same direction, so you can kind of shift. And chances are, especially in a group of 4, one of them will have some idea what's going on and kind of guide them back to where you need them to be. If not, at least they're going somewhere on their own. Like I said, they're going to build no matter what, unless they're way completely off topic. And as a teacher, you kind of learn to pick up on those signs. If they're smiling way too much when they're supposed to be doing something serious, you know that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I've talked about it in my blog about I feel like a sign of active learning is usually producing something. I try and make it something tangible. That being said, I really feel like it can't just be follow steps 1 through 5, because then you develop really rote learners that just follow these steps without actually putting the effort into anything, and they don't really get anything out of it. A product to be produced is the idea behind that is that there has to be some type of thought process involved that evokes their own creativity or requires them to build upon understanding to accomplish things. You can't just spell things out for them, otherwise they're really not going to learn anything. They're just going to go through the process and have this thing that's left over and they have no idea why. That's, the same thing as learning before. We just kind of taught procedures instead of thinking. And that's a part of active learning, is moving away from the teacher just talking at kids and kids repeating back what they heard, and actually getting them to engage cognitively and go through the process of making those connections themselves of what is being told to them, how it relates to them, and how they can build upon it to create something new. And with that, especially in Common Core, you're going to see a lot of things asking for reflection, whether it be science or math. They want to know, what did you do? How did you get this solution, this answer, whatever it may be, depending on the subject area. Now, why did you think that? And it really forces students to reflect upon their own thought processes and kind of come up with an answer. That whole metacognition thing comes into play of active learning, which wasn't really a part, especially of the No Child Left Behind. It was really just, this is how you get an answer, especially for math. And now we have a lot of adults who can, rattle off algorithms, but they have no thought processes behind it. So they've really never learned how to transfer these skills, and they don't understand how it benefits them. Like, people will say, I never use algebra. What was the point of taking it in high school? But we're now going to have these kids who, because they're being taught through Common Core and integrated math, that they're going to know that, oh, well, if I need to solve this problem, it is very similar to this, and I know how to adapt what I've done in the past to what I need to do in the present and in the future to actually suit my needs, which is a really different shift that we've seen in education. And that's all, blended in with the student-centered active learning approach. They talked about honor-based testing, or anytime you had a take-home assignment to, how do you know a kid's really doing it? And just Lisa mentioned that it shows students taking ownership of their learning, whether or not they engaged in it. And I know, based on her blog, that one of her goals for her learning environment is a flipped classroom. And a flipped classroom is basically built upon that foundation of the honor system and taking ownership of your learning. Last year, as a student teacher, I had a 5th grade class that my master teacher said he started out as a flipped classroom because it had worked really well for the year before, and some of his 5th graders were his 4th graders the year before, and they loved it. As 5th graders, he said, this group just doesn't do homework. It does not matter at what cost it comes to them. As a whole class, they just abstain from homework, so a flipped classroom environment really was not working for them. And that's kind of what online classes, I feel, are built upon, is that whole honor system, taking ownership, that you have to do all the work and then come into group discussions and assignments or video assignments like this. You have to have already done the work ahead of time to be able to build upon it in this kind of context. They talked about the physical polling, like the value line. Lisa mentioned she was calling it 1 through 5. I think the term's actually fist to 5, and I recently went to a professional learning community speaker workshop that we had. It was a 3-day workshop that our district paid for all of the elementary teachers to attend in our entire district, and that was one of the things that they actually talked about was fist to 5, 0 meaning you're firmly opposed to it, 5 you're fully supportive of it, and then all the numbers in between. And they said it was a really quick thing and a really great concept for kids to understand and to feel like their voice is being heard, and to actually it gets them to participate and take ownership of something because they have that opportunity to be a part of their learning environment. Lisa's right. Procedures have to be taught, especially in that instance. I know she teaches high school. I'm elementary. She doesn't want her kids to get out of their seats, and I personally do, because my kids get restless anyways. I sometimes have, we get to the point where we just stand up from our desks and sit in a corner of the floor because sitting at a table is too